I never imagined that an ordinary workday would turn into something like this, something so unexpected and unsettling, especially not in my own office. The day began just like any other, routine and calm, with the predictable sounds of keyboards clicking, phones ringing, and the hum of office chatter. But by the end of the day, everything had changed. I had seen something that I couldn't shake, a colleague, Jack, almost crossing a line that should never be crossed. It was something that changed how I saw him and my workplace forever. You think you know the people you work with, you see them every day, share meals, gossip about the latest office drama, and depend on each other during tight deadlines. You trust them, and in some cases, you even let your guard down around them. But sometimes, that trust gets shattered in ways that you could never predict. I didn't see it coming, and even now, I can't shake it off. Let me tell you how I almost caught my colleague doing something that I never thought I'd see right here, in the office where I had always felt safe. The day started normally. It was a Friday, and the office was buzzing with that subtle excitement that comes when the weekend is in sight. The mood was light. People were smiling, finishing tasks early, and chatting about their weekend plans. Our boss was away on vacation, so the pressure had lifted a bit, and the atmosphere was relaxed. People seemed a little more open, a little more playful. Jack was one of those people. He was in a good mood, telling jokes and making everyone laugh. He was the kind of guy who everyone liked, someone who could always lighten the mood. The hours ticked by, and as the afternoon wore on, people started trickling out of the office. By 5 p.m., only a few of us were left. The once busy office was slowly quieting down. There were only 3 of us, one of my colleagues who was still finishing up her work, myself, and Jack. Jack was still lingering, and it didn't seem unusual. He'd often stay late, and he had offered to help clean up and organize things for the upcoming week. It seemed harmless at the time, and honestly, I appreciated the help. Jack was known to be generous with his time, always willing to lend a hand. People often called him charming, and he had this way of making people feel at ease. But looking back now, I can see that there were always things about Jack that I should have noticed, things that, in hindsight, made me question just how well I really knew him. At the time, though, I had no reason to doubt him. After all, he was my colleague, someone I saw every day. What reason did I have to be suspicious? As I focused on organizing my desk, I started to notice that Jack wasn't actually doing much to help. He was just kind of standing there, hanging around the edge of my workspace. I asked if everything was okay, and he smiled and said yes, but the way he said it made me uneasy. It was like there was something behind his smile, something that didn't match the lightness of his tone. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe I was overthinking it. We all have off days, after all. But Jack wasn't his usual self. He kept standing there, and I noticed he was getting closer, leaning over my shoulder, standing just a little too near to me. It was like he was in my personal space, and it didn't feel right. I tried to stay focused, to keep working, but I could feel my body tensing up. Jack wasn't acting like the person I thought I knew. Or maybe this was the real Jack, and I just hadn't seen it before. Still, I said nothing. I wanted to believe that it was all innocent, that I was just imagining things. I mean, this was Jack. He was friendly, and maybe he was just being nice. But as the minutes ticked by, things began to feel even more off. He kept inching closer, and I could feel him standing right behind me. His presence felt heavy, and I was starting to feel trapped in my own office. I wasn't exactly scared, but I felt incredibly uncomfortable. It was this gnawing sense that something was wrong, and it was growing stronger with every passing second. And then Jack spoke. "You know," he said, his voice low and smooth, "you're not like the others here. There's something different about you." I froze. My fingers paused over my keyboard, and I felt my breath catch in my throat. What did he mean by that? My mind started racing, trying to make sense of his words, trying to figure out what to say. I knew I had to defuse the situation, but I wasn't sure how. So I tried to laugh it off. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light, even though my stomach was twisting in knots. Jack just smiled at me, this unsettling smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You're just different," he said, his gaze lingering on me in a way that made me feel exposed. This was it. This was the moment when I realized that I couldn't brush it off anymore. I couldn't ignore the uneasy feeling that had been building up inside me. Jack was crossing a line, and I needed to stop it, but how? How could I tell him to back off without making the situation worse? I turned back to my computer, trying to stay calm, trying to figure out my next move. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I kept my voice steady. "Hey, can you grab that folder for me?" I asked, pointing to the far side of the room. It was a small request, something to put some distance between us, even if just for a moment. Jack hesitated for a second, his eyes still on me, but then he stepped back and walked across the room to get the folder. I let out a small sigh of relief. I knew it was only a temporary reprieve, but I needed that space to collect my thoughts. When Jack returned, he handed me the folder, but his hand brushed against mine. It wasn't an accident this time. It was deliberate, a way of testing boundaries. My heart started racing again, and my stomach twisted. How could this be happening? How could Jack think that this was okay? I needed to do something. I needed to put an end to this. But I didn't know how to confront him without making things worse. I turned to face him, my heart pounding in my chest. I had to be clear, had to set a boundary. "Actually, Jack, I think I'm good here. It's getting late, and I need to finish up alone," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and steady. He paused for a moment, and I could see the hesitation in his eyes. He gave me that same unsettling smile. "All right," he said, finally, nodding. He took a step back, but I could tell he wasn't done yet. "If you ever need anything, you know you can always ask me," he said. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Thanks, Jack," I said, hoping my voice didn't betray the anxiety I was feeling. He lingered there for a moment longer before finally turning to leave. The moment the door clicked shut behind him, I felt the tension leave my body. But the unease was still there. I sat back in my chair, staring at the door. What had just happened? How had I ended up in this situation, feeling like I had to defend myself in my own workspace? The office was empty now, and it felt strange. It felt hollow, like the air had been sucked out of the room. I realized that, for the first time, I felt completely alone. The tension might have left, but that unsettling feeling was still lingering, like something had changed, and there was no way to go back to the way things were. I leaned back in my chair, taking a deep breath, trying to steady myself. My hands were still trembling slightly, and I wasn't sure if it was from the adrenaline or from the sheer disbelief of what had just happened. How had things gone so wrong? How had I missed the signs? Jack had always been someone I trusted, someone who was part of my daily life. And now I had to question everything. Had he always been like this, and I had just been too blind to see it? Were there signs that I had ignored? I shook my head, trying to push those thoughts away, but they kept coming back. I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let this slide. I wasn't going to pretend like nothing had happened. Jack had crossed a line, and I needed to protect myself. I needed to make sure that this didn't happen again. The next few days were difficult. I avoided Jack as much as possible. When I saw him in the office, I felt my chest tighten. He tried to act like nothing had happened, like everything was normal, but I could see the way he looked at me. I could see that he knew what he had done. There were a few times when Jack tried to talk to me, to strike up a conversation, but I kept my responses short. I didn't want to give him any opening, any way to continue what had happened that day. But it was exhausting. It was exhausting trying to avoid him, trying to act like everything was fine when it wasn't. The tension was always there, just beneath the surface, and it was wearing me down. I realized that I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep pretending that nothing had happened. I needed to take action. I needed to find a way to address what had happened, even if it meant having a difficult conversation with Jack. I needed to protect myself, and I needed to make sure that Jack understood that what he had done was not okay. But it wasn't just about me. It was about everyone else in the office, too. If Jack had done this to me, who's to say he wouldn't do it to someone else? I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't let someone else go through what I had gone through. The next day, I decided to speak to HR. I was nervous, my palms were sweaty, and my heart was racing, but I knew it was the right thing to do. I walked into the HR office and told them everything. I told them. Thank you for watching this video. Make sure you subscribe to this channel for more videos.